Welcome to another episode of Dark Rhino Security Confidential. Today we are honored to be joined by Troy Fonten. Troy is an industry recognized leader. He's been in this business for a long time. He is a compliance expert. And you want to talk about SOC 2, ISO 27001, HIPAA, FedRAMP, CMMC. Troy really understands these frameworks. His background and understands cybersecurity. He's worked with continuous improvement in many different organizations. A brilliant guy. We're honored to have him here today. Troy, thank you so much for joining us on this sunny day in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania.
Yes, it is very sunny. It feels like spring. Thank you. Thank you for that introduction. Brilliant. I like the word brilliant. Let's go with brilliant.
Yeah. Hey, you know what? Look, I'm in the business and I don't know all those frameworks. So it takes a degree of understanding to really get into it. And we're going to talk about it because I think this is a topic of huge interest where people really need to get their minds wrapped around these. But before we go there, we always love starting with an origin story because everybody wants to know where the beginnings are. So what is your origin story, if you don't mind sharing with us?
Sure. Yeah. Where do I start? Well, we'll start. No, I'm just kidding. How far back do I go? But yeah, so graduated from Ohio State. I am a Buckeye. Had an unfortunate.
Oh my, by the way, so good school choice.
Yes, yeah. You guys are in Columbus, so that's where I know Dark Rhino from. But football was a little rough this year. But anyway, graduated from there. I graduated in 2009. Right, that probably wasn't the best time to graduate college. That was during the economic crisis. So getting a job was not. It was a struggle. I remember. Right. It took me about 6 months actually after I graduated to get a job. But when I finally landed a job, I actually just took like what I could get, and I became a business intelligence consultant for a local consulting data, doing extract, transform, and load jobs, like helping
ETL transactions, man.
Yes.
That was like bread and butter for a long time.
Yes.
Yeah.
And we were using big data, helping companies use their big data. Big data was like the big buzzword at the time, right? It was a local consulting company out of Columbus, Ohio. I did accounting and IS in college. So they hired me. I knew IT. It was a lot of SQL. I wrote a lot of SQL code for that job, right? That was good though. I did that for about a year and a half. And
so I take it you were primarily working with Oracle at that time?
So we were using a tool called Informatica. If you remember,
Know it well.
Stage. I think one of the tools might have been an Oracle tool. Data Stage was an IBM tool, I think. But that's what we were doing. Writing a lot of SQL. But I then transferred to Pittsburgh. After about a year and a half in Columbus, I ended up moving to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania. Didn't want to do a long distance relationship anymore, so I came to Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, and I found this IT auditor job at a CPA firm. I didn't really know much about IT auditing, but I read the job description, and it involved testing IT controls on financial systems. So I figured my business background and my IT background would be a good fit. Did the interview and got the job.
Okay, I got to pause you there for 1 second because that is like a total orthogonal turn, if you will.
Yeah.
Did you know somebody in the firm to get that first interview? Or because we have a lot of listeners that are looking to transition into cyber.
Yeah.
And some of them really struggle, to get that break, that first few. And it sounds like you, how did you tee it up? How did you get it?
So if I remember correctly, this was about almost 13 years ago. So I knew an employee that worked at the firm. Well, I didn't know them. My wife now, girlfriend at the time, she knew somebody that she used to work with at another CPA firm that worked there. uh, and we found this IT audit role, and I just gave my resume to him, and he submitted my resume for that role. And that's how I guess I got the interview, because I guess I knew somebody there. But at the time, like, there also weren't many people applying to that type of role. Like, IT auditor was a very kind of like, I don't want to say new, but it wasn't like it is now, right? Like,
Yeah.
cybersecurity wasn't even like really a word yet, probably in the mainstream in 2010, 2011. And I don't think there were many people applying. So when they saw a good candidate come through who had, who understood IT, but also had like a auditing, I did accounting in college, right? So I had
Yeah.
that auditing background. Plus I already had an IT like job for about a year and a half. So I had that. So I think they saw a good candidate come through. They gave me a chance. And when they interviewed, I was a personable person. I could answer questions. I could answer basic questions about IT, basic questions about auditing. And it's a really tough position to fill. Like throughout my career, finding like auditors is actually a very still a tough role to find because
Really?
it's just not a sexy job, right? If that if that makes sense, like it's not a job when you think about cybersecurity and GRC, or well, GRC, yes, auditor, but when you think of cybersecurity, not many people think like entry level auditor at a public
Right.
accounting firm doing like auditing work, and nobody really thought that in 2011, right?
Yep.
Like nobody was thinking that, and I wasn't thinking that either. I was just thinking I'm young. I don't. Let's just go. Like I can't be picky, right? Let's just get a job and see where it takes me. That's kind of like the theme of my career. I've always just kind of been like, let's go, and not really think about it. I when I think about something, I tend to talk myself out of it. So I try not to think. And when I was younger, I didn't think. I didn't have any responsibilities. I didn't have kids. I didn't have a family. So
Yep.
I took my chances when I could, and I wasn't going to be picky. And that was my attitude. And that's what I
Hey,
did.
what? It's a strategy, and it worked. It paid off for you, obviously.
It paid off, and you know what? I think it's wasn't as easy. Like this whole idea of remote working wasn't a thing yet either. Like you couldn't just go find a job anywhere and apply and have 1,000 people applying for the same job. There wasn't, online. You could apply online to places, but it wasn't like very prevalent. Like LinkedIn, you weren't just like searching jobs on LinkedIn and applying. Like people weren't like posting jobs as much on LinkedIn then. So I didn't have any information anyways to go off of, right? Like I think nowadays you could get all this information thrown at you and you're like, oh, but this will be bad, but this will this. And you just talk yourself out of it because there's so much information coming at you all the time. And that's hard to deal with. Like if I was trying to look for a job now, I think it'd be a lot harder, especially in cybersecurity, because there's just so much information out there. How do you know what information is accurate? Uh, how do you know what path you should go on? Because you talk to this person, they'll tell you one thing. You talk to this person. Um, I was always just trust my gut, but I also didn't have all this information flow coming at me at the time, which I think is uh, liberating when you think about that, right? I think we get so much information thrown at us that we don't know what to do with it. Well, I didn't have that information. I just did it. I
Well,
just acted.
well, you know what, Troy? It sounds like, and you're not giving yourself enough credit for it, but you had a stronger sense of intuition than you might realize, because that's something that when you have too much information, that gets disabled
Yep.
because you're bringing too much. There's an overabundance of data, which gets you nowhere.
Right.
Whereas there's an innate intelligence inside of all of us that if you call upon it, a lot of times it can guide you in the right direction in ways that you don't
Yes.
necessarily.
Can you spot the signal and the noise, so to speak?
That's
Right.
right. That's exactly what that is.
Yeah. But yeah, that's how I got into IT auditing. I guess I should continue with the origin story.
Yeah. So that got you into this. And now did you have to um, go through a lot of learnings for SOC 2, ISO 27001, all these different
So,
how yeah.
yeah, good question. So when I was at the CPA firm, I really focused on Sarbanes-Oxley first. So I did
Okay.
Sarbanes-Oxley testing, which we were basically we were helping companies, public companies that needed Sarbanes-Oxley. As a part of that, you need to do IT control testing around your financial applications. So
Okay.
your main accounting systems, you need to have good access control, good change management, like all the basic IT stuff. That's what I was doing initially. Fast forward a couple of years, the AICPA came out with this new standard called SOC 1 and SOC 2. Formerly, it was called SAS 70, but it didn't really focus on security. It was really focused on financial systems and same thing like IT controls around those. But then they came out with this SOC 2, which was like a security focused audit on any type of system that has any type of sensitive data. So I guess you could call it intuition again, but I saw an opportunity and we were starting to get into doing those types of audits. And I raised my hand and said, hey, can I start working on these? Right. Because I saw that like this is going to be, I guess it was intuition, right? I guess you could call it me not thinking and taking chances or intuition. But yeah, I had an intuition about it. And I raised my hand and started doing those types of audits. I didn't, I just, I learned by experience, but I took an opportunity because nobody really knew what they were doing with those audits yet, right? So if you
Yeah.
don't have any baseline to go off of, then you can't really mess up because you are creating the baseline, so to speak, right? So uh, that's a challenge in itself, right? Though if you had to be able to like think on your feet and figure things out and want to have that personality, but so started doing SOC 2. And we just started growing our SOC 2 audit practice. And I just started auditing clients that were SaaS companies, startups that were hosting their applications in AWS, Azure, GCP. And I was just learning on the job what AWS was. I didn't know what S3 meant when I was
Buckets were,
auditing
yeah. Yeah.
AWS. I didn't know what any of that stuff meant, but I just learned it and figured it out. So that's really how I learned how to do the actual auditing. Then I started to read like the standards, so to speak, the material about like the requirements on how you're supposed to audit, so to speak. Um, but the actual like testing and learning like cloud security and figuring that all out was just kind of learned like based on experience. Um, and then from there, I just kept getting more into security. At that time, I had my CPA, I had my CISA, and then I ended up I wanted to learn more about security and cybersecurity, so I thought getting my CISP would be a good idea. So I worked, the firm supported and invested in paying for people to get those types of certifications. So I took advantage of that. Ended up getting my CISP, and from there, I just started building a brand for myself. I'd gathered all this information over the last 10 years. I was getting so many questions every time I was trying to talk to a prospect or a client about SOC 2 or different compliance standards. They were always asking the same question. And I kept answering the same question over and over. So I was just like, why don't I just proactively put this information out to the world and see what happens and just start educating people, like we talked about before we started the podcast.
Yeah.
And that's what I started doing. I started democratizing compliance in SOC 2 on LinkedIn and just started posting information, answering
That,
simple questions that people were always asking me. Uh,
so what,
and that's where
give
it
us like
started.
your top three that you get still even today, probably get all the time.
Top three today. Well, the funny thing is, people are so much more educated now. I mean, not just because of me. There's just so much information out there. But what's the top three? Well, I don't know if I still get them today, but really just basic, like what's the difference between a type 1 and a type 2? Like people never understood that ever. Whenever you would ask like, oh, are you thinking about getting a SOC 2 type 1 or a SOC 2 type 2? And they'd be like, I have no idea. What are those? And then I would just start explaining that and educating them. Another common question would have been, um, what's involved in a SOC 2? Like what areas are covered in a SOC 2? So a lot of people think that when you do a SOC 2, like it's all technical controls, right? Or like
It's
access
not,
control, risk.
and it costs a fortune because we went through it, and it's no fun. But I digress. Please keep
Yeah,
going.
yeah, well, we can talk about that after the podcast, but yeah. So people think it's all like technical controls, right? Like if I'm especially a SaaS company, right? So let's say you're offering a SaaS solution. A lot of people just think it's going to be like, oh, you just have to talk to our engineering team and figure out all the technical security controls within the application. But really, that's like 40 to 50% of an audit is that. A lot of the audit is going to be like all your entity level and other departments like policies and procedures, risk assessment, vendor management, um, communications with your customers and clients, onboarding, offboarding. Like that's the other 50%. I wouldn't even, and that's not really technical controls. That's like administrative and controls that have nothing to do with your um, technology all the time, right?
Yeah, but
So
they have huge security implications depending on how you execute them.
they do have big security implications, and
I would argue they have bigger security implications than some of the technical controls, but
you are correct exactly. But that was a common misconception. There was like, oh wait, you're gonna have to like understand our how we onboard new hires to our systems. Oh, that's not even on me. That's like our HR team. Like, I got to get them involved as part of this audit. Yeah. Oh, okay. This is a little bit going to be a little bit more effort than I thought. So that was a common that was a common question. Like, what was the scope of the SOC 2? I guess that's really a common question. Um, you said top three. What was another one? Oh man, there's so
you can
many.
substitute it. What's the dumbest question? I know there's no
I don't think
such
there's any
thing.
dumb questions.
I knew that would be.
Uh, uh, what's the dumbest question? Oh, I might have to think about that one. We might have to come back to that.
Okay, so I'll ask it. Does this do anything to improve security?
I don't think that's a dumb question. I think that's a very in-depth question, actually, because that's a very interesting question. Because at the end of the day, you know, I don't know if it. I don't know how we can measure that impact, right? So, like, how do you met like it would mean I've been interested in this answer for a long time, and I think somebody needs to like actually do like a real study on it. Like organizations that have done SOC 2 or been ISO 27001 certified or have FedRAMP or you know HITRUST certified, whatever the case may be, are they more likely or less likely to um, to experience an incident, and what is the impact of those incidents when they do that, right? So maybe the likelihood of an incident is the same, right? But if you have good controls in place, then the impact of those incidents should be less, right? So if you have
You
good
would
controls and
think,
you have SOC 2 and ISO, you should be able to recover faster and mitigate the impact of an incident.
but
So,
this is, I can tell you, and this is pure anecdotal because we have not done a research study on this that's scientific by any stretch of the imagination, right? So this is kind of like putting your thumb out in the wind, and which is what I'm about to say is from what we have seen, whether you get breached or not has not materially impacted on whether you meet compliance standards. Okay.
right.
The question about do you recover faster, that to be materially impacted either. It seems a polite way to say it, and it's almost like it's a checklist. People are going through the checklist process
Right.
without diving into the in-depth what it's not sparking. And I would love to hear your side of it and say, no, Manoj, you're wrong. It seems like what it's not sparking is that conversation, like when you're asking about what is your onboarding process, right? Okay, I have it documented, I have it listed out, and I can show to you that I hired 3 people last year, and this is how they went through it. Okay, well, I would want to know, what was the order in which you provisioned their systems? And did you inadvertently enable an escalation of privileges as you provisioned those systems? When they left, how did you deprovision it? How did you make sure that the deprovisioning was complete? And can you certify that? right?
Yep.
Because orphaned accounts, man, we find them all the time, Troy.
Right.
We run into it all the time. And I'm just giving you an example. We could spend the next 4 hours talking about various gaps that arise, but I would hope that when you're asking those questions, those conversations are coming to mind and saying, yeah, we'll meet compliance, but by the way, this looks like it's an exploitable vulnerability in our process, not in our technology. Big
Right.
difference, right? It's
Yep.
an exploitable vulnerability in our process, and we should really address it. And I'll let you counter, and I'd love to get a real auditor's perspective on this. Ah,
Well, hopefully, a good auditor would have caught those vulnerabilities as part of the audit. I think. I guess that brings up the point of like an audit is only as good as the auditors performing the audit, right? Um, and that's a whole nother discussion. But the rigor of an audit can is important, so to speak, right? Um, and so if an auditor is not necessarily going to that depth, then I think going back to your original question of do audits do they mitigate security risk? Let's just call it that. That is the question. Then the answer is probably no in that instance, right? I mean, if you're just checking a box to pass an audit and there's no um, culture of constantly improving security, and someone only does security when an auditor is coming in and they provide their evidence, give them their little, hey, show me how you onboarded this employee, show me how you offboarded this employee. Here's my checklist. We signed off on it. If that's the audit, then yeah, we're doing a disservice to the people relying on these reports, for lack of a better way to look at it. And I think you're right. I think that the audits aren't going far enough. But that brings up the question, you know, most companies don't want their auditor to find those things, right?
oh, thank you. Okay, keep going. I won't stop you because there's a whole laundry list of questions on this one. But go ahead,
Yeah,
please.
well, I mean, yeah, like you're I think about this a lot too, right? So, in order for me to do a rigorous audit, that's going to take me more time, right? If it's going to take me more time, it's going to cost my client more money, right? So the client then says, wait, if I pay you more money, you're going to do a more in-depth audit, and there's a higher risk that you're going to find something we're doing wrong because nobody's perfect.
Yep.
But then I have these other auditors over here who are charging half your price. Well, that means they must not be doing as in-depth of an audit, but I'm still getting this piece of paper at the end of it that I can show to my customers
Or my regulator or whoever it
or
is.
whoever, right? Um, and there's a lot of that going on. I think in the I think there's a lot of that thinking going on, whether it's conscious or subconsciously, from people that are looking for auditors. Um, I think in the back of their mind, they people want a good auditor, but what they won't tell you is they also don't want an auditor that's going to dig too deep and find things that another auditor wouldn't find, right? So if I use a smaller firm and I don't pay them as much money, then they're not going to spend as much time on my audit. So they have less chance of finding things.
Oh, it gets better than that, Troy. And we've experienced this firsthand, where there was a company, a former client of ours, that was being pushed to get their SOC 2 Type 1 and then get their SOC 2 Type 2 by the industry in which they did business, right? And we were putting in a defense in depth approach, which genuinely was geared towards a material reduction in risk. And that takes time. And it also takes a change in employee behavior because there's things that you have to put in. You already know this procedurally and from a policy perspective that really alter. It doesn't complicate, it doesn't interfere, but it does change the way people are used to doing things. And they're like, well, no, we don't want to do any of that. We want to meet the minimum to get this done. To the point, they're like, oh, well, yeah, we need X technology. I really don't want to, because I don't want to give away who it is or what happened here. But and they're like, well, yeah, well, we have the technology. We're paying you for it, but it's not implemented. That's okay. The question is, do we have this control? No, you don't. Yeah, we do. We're paying you for it,
Right.
but it isn't rolled out.
Yeah.
There's a lot of that. It's like they're being driven by the market, because the market wants a reassurance that a certain level of due diligence has been done in these processes.
Yep.
But the client's looking at it and saying, you know what, I really want the revenue stream to not be disrupted, which is understandable.
Yep.
So I just want to check the box and just move on, and who cares about this stuff? This is why we have cyber liability coverage. If things hit the fan, we'll let them deal with it.
Yeah. 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 So in your situation, it was more, we don't need to do this full defense in depth strategy or solution because we can get this SOC 2 type 1
without it, and it's okay. Now they were in the medical healthcare field, and forget the fact that if those records are out and PII is out there, all right, that's why we have AIG.
Yeah. Yeah. That's why you have insurance. Yeah.
That's how we backfill that. We've had other clients that, they are required to have, MFA single sign-on is a basic requirement anymore. They have the technology, but they haven't turned it on. It's like, yeah, we bought multi-factor, but our team doesn't like that's too hard. We don't want that. I'm not making these are real examples. I wish they were lies and they were just total nonsensical garbage, but it really happens.
Yeah, I think that, and I guess it's not just, it's a big cybersecurity problem across the board, right? It's people not understanding the risk of implementing controls. And I think part of the reason is that, like, obviously all these cost money, all these solutions cost money. Sure. It's not just a procedural change and culture change. Sometimes, like maybe with MFA, it might have been. I mean, with the defense in depth solution, it's a big cost, right? And so you're trying to get a budget approved. You're trying to explain to somebody why we need this solution, why we need to implement it. And the people you're explaining it to are trying to understand an ROI, right? Well, what's the ROI, right? Okay, well, the ROI is we won't get breached, but like, how do you, like, okay, what if we don't implement the solution? Like, what's the risk of getting breached if we don't have this solution? Well, you need to almost like do like a return on control, so to speak, like a return on investment, return on control, and you need to measure, you need to quantify risk, right? So here's the risk without this solution. And then when we have that solution, our risk is going to be X. So our return on that risk reduction is this risk minus the risk when we implement it. And it's almost trying to like explain it in those terms, because the people making the financial decisions can't understand risk unless it's quantified. And they need to understand what's the risk with it, what's the risk without it.
So this is cost avoidance in many respects, right? So the question is, do you have fire flood insurance on your house, Troy? I'm sure you do. Did your house burn down last year? Nope.
No, right.
Are you still paying for it?
Right.
All right. So what's your ROI?
Yeah.
There's that, and then there's the question of, if you look at the stats, and we only service the SMB space, really. We do some work in the enterprise on a consultative basis, but most of our work is in SMB, small medium businesses. Those people sub 1,500, 2,000 employees. That group. 6 months, according to insurance statistics, 6 months post breach, many of these companies are out of business. Okay.
Yeah.
So what is that? Now that's a quantifiable statistic, because that's from an outside measure. If we as a cybersecurity company, or you as an auditor, presented, it might be a little bit of a self-serving thing. Well, you're just trying to sell me more hours, or I'm trying to sell you whatever,
Yeah.
no, more security, or whatever the case may be. It may be looked at that way, but that's a genuine thing. And
But, if you going back to the insurance though, let's look at car insurance. There are
yeah,
rules that said if you're going to go on the road, you need to have car insurance, right? So they almost made laws to force people
yes,
to buy that because they could impact other people, right? So we don't have those types of mandates for cybersecurity, right? Like,
yet,
if you think about it, like, right, like I give you
yeah,
my data, there's really no mandate unless I put it in a contract for you to have, you might put contractual clauses in there, but there's not like a law that says, like, in order for you to do business with other customers, CMMC might be that, and FedRAMP might be close to that. But if we're looking at the private sector, you're not working with the federal government, there's not like laws that would require you to do certain things, like in car insurance, right? I can't drive a car without car insurance in Pennsylvania, right? Because if I get in an accident, I got to have money to, if it's my fault, to pay for the damages, right?
and you know what, Troy, the counter you get is, well, cybersecurity is unique in that the other side is often, this isn't criminal behavior, or in the traditional sense of somebody's got a gun, they come into your house and they say, get out, or give me your money, or as the case may be. These are very sophisticated actors who are constantly piercing the veil of technology and process
Yeah.
at every moment to try to find a way to infiltrate. And companies are like, we can't stop that. And there's a little bit of a truth to that statement. I mean, staying ahead of that is a very impossible task almost. There's always going to be a way to breach something. And they're like, well, then why should I be held liable for something that I can't prevent anyways? I've heard that argument, and I have a counter to it, but your thoughts as a pro on this? What?
Why should I be held liable, you're saying, for
Yeah,
a breach of my
yeah,
customers' data and my systems?
yeah. When if there's 5,000 PhDs who work at the GRU, who wake up every morning trying to figure out every gap in Microsoft's
Tech stack.
environment or Amazon's environment and how they're going to do bad things, I can't compete with that. You're telling me my cybersecurity guys or my IT team of 4 people is going to stop that crew?
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, then I don't know if I have a good counter to that. They're right. They're not going to be able to stop it. I don't think you can. I don't think you can prevent it. There is no silver bullet that's going to allow them to prevent it.
there is no silver bullet. You're right.
But I guess, should they be held liable? Um, if it's negligence, yes. Like, I mean, if it's something that's like,
That's a brilliant answer, and that's my counter to the whole thing, right? If it's negligence, have you done enough?
you're right.
Well, no one is saying that you're going to be breach free. I mean, even any of our customers, we never guarantee that we can stop all breaches. We can't do that, right? But if we do our job right, we can certainly make sure the ship doesn't sink or even really suffer, major catastrophic
Right.
losses.
Yeah, I mean, I think for companies, it's something even as simple as like, you know, we all know where our money is, right? Like we all could tell you exactly what banks we have our money in, what 401ks are, where's this, where's that, where it's hidden in our house. Like we could all tell you that right away, right now. If I asked you, where's your customer's data? Could you answer that question? I, most people
I
probably couldn't answer
I can
that question.
actually tell you where it
You
is.
might, yeah, but you're a cybersecurity. You could, but I guarantee if you went to like the leader of a well, depending on size, it's hard to know where it all is, right? But do they even know what they have to protect and where it is? I guess is my question, right?
Oh my God, that
That,
topic's come up on the show 1,000 times, but
yeah, that because I think that's the number one thing. It's like don't start doing anything if you don't know what you need to protect or where it is. Like I'm like, what do you if you don't know where what you're protecting, what do you build? Like how are you going to protect it? It's like
so Troy, that brings up a question on when you go into an organization as a professional auditor, is your interface typically the technical team, or do you have the year of the executive team to report back to them and really give them genuine feedback on
it
rather than because the exec team doesn't understand, maybe they don't understand why we need a sim or how does it
yeah,
work or what.
right.
Right.
It probably depends on the size of the company, I would say, right? I mean, I think smaller companies, the exec team is usually at least interested in the results, so to speak, of the audit, right? As you get into bigger organizations, it depends if the person like leading the security team is considered part of the executive team, right? I mean, sometimes they have a direct line to people on the C-suite. Sometimes they don't, or they're a couple layers removed. Um, so it really depends on when you get to the bigger companies, but a lot of times we're not necessarily directly engaging with the executive team at larger companies during the audit. Um, they have too much going on to worry about me, but uh, you know,
But do they? But because if you highlight vulnerabilities and gaps in process, I would imagine they have a fiduciary responsibility to correct.
yeah, yeah, that is a good point. But it depends on their governance structure, right? Like who's responsible for those gaps, I guess, right? What the people do with our audit report internally is a good question. I don't always know that answer, right? So if there's gaps or vulnerabilities identified, and I think it's different too with the type of audit, if that makes sense, right? If you're doing a SOC 2 or ISO and it's an external audit, that's kind of meant as a report for your customers. That type of audit might not necessarily like it won't be as in depth probably as like an internal audit, right? So if I'm in a large company and there's an internal audit being done by internal audit on a very, let's just say, identity access management. So internal audit's doing an identity access management audit over the entire company and how they manage identities and how they remove, how they onboard, how they do all that. That type of report, if there's gaps called out in that type of report that's meant for management or executive teams, I think yes. I think those types of reports are getting reported to audit committees. They're getting reported to executive level team members, and they're seeing those results. And they then have a responsibility to make sure that those vulnerabilities and those gaps are being remediated. So I think if we're talking internal audit at a large company, yes, I think they are seeing. I think certain members of the executive team are seeing those results for sure.
Regarding CMMC specifically, I think I'll just call it level two, where you have like I believe it's 108 controls you have to meet. Do you think
Yes. Yep.
that is overbearing for many of the businesses that have to comply, or is that does not go far enough?
Well, NIST 171, right? That's really what it is.
Yeah.
Oh, that's a fun question. No,
Sorry.
I
Hey, it's
mean,
Friday. Let's.
yeah. Does it go far enough? I mean, I does any. We could always say nothing. Something could always be more. I guess is what I'm saying, right? Um, but I think, yeah. If we look through NIST 171, I'm sure we would say like, why doesn't it talk about X? We'd be like, where's this? Why is it not talking about that? So yes, it could always go do more. But I think if we compare it to what's going on in the defense industrial base right now, meaning like the maturity of security at these companies is probably very low. And if they're not mandated to do something, they're just going to continue to have low maturity in terms of security. Um, then it does go far enough, I guess, if that makes sense, right? Like if
That's
we
good to
if
hear,
we
actually.
right
It
we
makes
take
a
that what they're
difference.
doing now is nothing, and something is better than nothing, as far as I'm concerned. At this point, do we need to iterate and then constantly improve and get better? Yes, you should always keep doing that. But I think for a lot of companies in the defense industrial base, complying with NIST standard 171 is going to be a burden. It's going to be hard for them to do, um, especially for the smaller players, right? The smaller manufacturers um, might not even have a security person, and now all of a sudden they got to implement 110 controls. That's going to be hard for them to do. Uh, for the companies like Boeing and
Oh,
all the
yeah.
big
Well,
primes, they're already been doing this. They've had so many regulations. They have to do all this. It's not. It probably doesn't go far enough for them, right? But if you're talking the smaller players, it goes far enough, um, and they're probably going to struggle for the smaller players. um, but it's better than it's we need something. They need to start somewhere.
how much time do you think it would take a firm in that defense industrial base, small medium business, to actually comply with the CMMC requirements? This one said, if
Yeah.
what's how big is the bread box? What's a
Well,
range here? I mean,
if they're starting from if they have nothing in place like today, I guess it's probably 12 months if I had to guess to do it all.
okay,
Just because it's going to require solutioning, like right, finding tools, evaluating tools, changing your policies and procedures, um, you know, implementing new uh, new controls that you might get pushback on, right? So it's not understanding what you have to do isn't the problem. It's it's implementing, right, and getting people to do what you want them to do, and finding the right tools and finding the budget, right? All that takes time. So it's not necessarily. I think people have a misconception that it's all implementation, so to speak, right? Like we have 110 controls, it's gonna take us so long to implement. But the implementation part might not take long. But if you're trying to buy three new tools to do something, you don't have the budget. Getting the budget approved might take 6 months, right? Depending on the organization, right? Or evaluating the tools. Once you have them, that might take a month to configure them and get them up and running and do what you want them to do. But it's that initial 6 months that people don't understand
yeah,
because they haven't been involved with it. So I think people need to understand that it's not just um, implementation. It's really the administrative um, and red tape and overhead that, depending on the culture of your organization, might slow you down a lot. So you should start thinking about it now so that stuff doesn't get in the way. Because when sales says, "Are we CMMC certified yet?" Uh, and you're like,
that
"Well,
might
I've
be
been
a
trying to
late
get this
point to
budget approved
start.
for 6 months." That's not going to be a fun conversation to have, right? So, yeah, that's what people need to start thinking about.
The jump from SOC 2 Type 1 to SOC 2 Type 2, how long does that take?
That probably doesn't take as long as you would think, because SOC 2 Type 1 really the difference between Type 1 and Type 2, it's more of from the auditor side. right? So an auditor has to do more testing, has to look at more evidence, has to do more sampling, so to speak, throughout the period. But the controls are, if you're doing a type 1 and type 2, the controls should be the same. The difference is you're going to have to give more evidence to your auditor, spend more time with your auditor. They're going to ask you more questions. They're going to look at more evidence. Uh, that's the biggest difference. But if you did a type 1 and your controls are in place and they're operating, theoretically speaking, you should be good for the type 2.
That's good to know. Now, and the SOX standard is an accounting standard, if I understand correctly,
It
right? It's
is.
not NIST.
It is not. It is the standard is by the AICPA, the Association of International Certified Public Accountants. Yeah.
I bet you a lot of people didn't know that. And that, they're thinking that's a security standard, and it's not. It's which is interesting that a bunch of accountants got together and put it in place. So
Yes. Yeah. That is another fun topic to discuss. Um, but it is true that auditors accounts got together. But I would also make the argument that NIST might not have lawyers. I don't know. I don't know who's putting together NIST, but the the people putting together NIST aren't necessarily practitioners, I guess, either in the security field potentially, right? Um, so I think the standards are good in general, but I think the what organizations need to think about is how can I make these standards practical to my situation, right? Nobody's going to comply with NIST 153 100%. It's impossible. Like it's not even or CMMC. But you need to be flexible and you need to be able to interpret what the standard says and make it practical for you. Um, you know, and base it off of risk, right? I mean, again, these standards are written with a certain type of organization in mind. And if you're a smaller organization, you don't face the same types of risks necessarily. You don't necessarily need to implement a very expensive tool. Maybe a spreadsheet is good enough for a small organization to start off. Maybe, right?
why not? Yeah, no.
But I think people need to be practical about security. The standards are great, but you need to be practical about it and understand how do I implement this uh, the way that makes sense for my organization while also meeting what the spirit of the standard says.
Which is this something that you and your firm do when they hire you? Is provide them the practical guidance even prior to audit
I
as
think I
to
think
how
we
to use
do
it?
that naturally. Yeah, I don't think we're like coming out and saying that we're doing that, but I think if you have conversations with our team or there's a lot of good auditors that are probably doing this out there, but naturally we're probably being practical when we're having our conversations because we've had experience working with these types of organizations. And so we are, when we do like consulting engagements, we are taking practical approaches with them, having collaborative conversations, really understanding like what is your system like, what is the risk, like what type of data do you have, maybe your data is less, if you don't have highly sensitive data, a long-winded process and control might not be necessary, right? So I think it just comes down to having collaborative conversations and really understanding their systems, asking the right questions, and just being fun. Being a fun auditor. We like to be fun.
Ah,
So
that's two fun and auditor are two words that usually do not
that
coexist. But so that's unique. I'll give you that.
we want to be a fun auditor. It's why I post memes. It's to be fun.
That's right. You're a creator of memes, if I'm not
That
mistaken.
that's that. I guess sometimes I get good ones out there. But you gotta have fun with not even just with auditing, right? With security in general. I think, right? I think we all get. It's very easy to get burnt out in the
Oh,
security
it can be a very
industry.
dry topic too.
It's dry. It's scary at times, especially with some of these things going on with like solar winds. It can cause anxiety. So you gotta like lighten it up a little bit, have fun. Um, so that's what I try to do.
And well, we're at the hour here. I want to give you a couple minutes. Is there anything you want to plug or let our audience know about? The floor is yours on anything you want
Anything
to.
you want to? Well, if you're looking for SOC 2, I'm your guy, Gills Norton. Come reach out. But yeah, I don't really have anything to plug specifically. I would just recommend read good books that have nothing to do with security. Like
Do
read
you
good
have
books.
one that you would absolutely recommend?
What's one that I would absolutely recommend? Start with Why by Simon Sinek.
Cynic.
Um, it's one of the first, not the first, but one of the best books I've ever read. And probably 10 years ago I read it. And I would definitely recommend everybody read that book. It's just it boils down to anything you're doing or decisions you're doing. You need to understand why you're doing them first before you understand the how. Most people start with the how first, like how do I do this? But they don't stop to think why am I doing this? And once you understand why you're doing something, it drives the how, right? So your decisions become a lot easier when it's clear why you're doing something, which is kind of relatable to security, right? If you're just implementing controls to implement controls, what's the point, right? Like, understand why are we implementing this? Oh, we're trying to do this. We're trying to reduce this type of risk here, and we're trying to protect this data over here. Oh, well, all you have to do is do this, right? But if you start just like implementing, and don't understand why, you can go down the wrong path very quickly. So, I recommend everybody read that book. It's really relatable to anything in life. So, it's a book I would read.
Awesome advice. Thank you so much for sharing your Friday afternoon with us, Troy. Really appreciate it. It was a great conversation.
I appreciate you having me. It was fun, and yeah, we should catch up in Pittsburgh.
Sounds like a plan to me.